Welcome to the Wednesday, January 2nd edition of the Clemson Dubcast. Happy New Year to everybody. Hope y'all enjoyed all the games yesterday and last night. The Sugar Bowl. Man, I wonder what the Twitter feeds of Georgia's players and fans look like today. I haven't checked, but whoo boy, not pretty for the Dogs in the Superdome in New Orleans. The day after tomorrow, hard to believe, Clemson's football team and a bunch of other folks, including yours truly, head out to Northern California to begin final on-site preparations for the national championship. One of the most incredible matchups of great teams in college football history, between a bunch of freaks on one side and a bunch of freaks on the other. Clemson and Alabama, round 4. It's going to be a blast. So 2 weeks ago, Tom Rinaldi was in Clemson doing interviews for a story that was to run the day of the Cotton Bowl on College Game Day. He was doing a story on the 10-year anniversary of Dabo taking over as Clemson's head coach. So I went over there and was hoping to score an interview with him. And he was such a gracious person to meet and talk to, and was really enormously flattered to hear him say that the idea for his story came from our series of articles at TigerIllustrated.com back in October on the, I guess, official 10-year anniversary, the week of October 13th. So Tom did a really good job, he and his producer and ESPN, in that story that ran a few days ago. And a couple of days before that, in Dallas, we caught up with him for a podcast. Now, from that podcast, we ran an article earlier this week in Tom's own words for his thoughts on Dabo and Nick Saban and the anniversary and all that. But we're going to provide the podcast in the pure interview form here in a few. Title sponsor of the Clemson Dubcast, Parham Smith, an Archenhold law firm in Greenville. Very happy to have them aboard. Couldn't do it without them. Blake Smith and Brooke Archenhold, both Clemson grads, both huge fans. Forte of their firm is medical negligence. They represent patients and their family members in medical negligence actions. They also handle all sorts of other complex personal injury litigation. I can vouch for them. About 10 years ago, a family member had a pretty serious medical situation with one of the local hospitals, went to Blake Smith, and he very quickly and authoritatively gave us some great advice, and we were very thankful for that. Parham Smith and Archenhold offers free consultations. Give them a call, 864-990-4581 or parhamlaw.com. Okay, if you hear Clemson's band playing in the background for a good portion of this interview, that is because as it was being conducted from my room in the Omni Hotel in Dallas, right outside, about 23 floors down, Clemson's band was practicing. So no, your mind isn't playing tricks on you, and know that the frequencies aren't mixed up. That was actually happening. So, all right, here we go. Tom Rinaldi, enjoy. Okay, joined here by Tom Rinaldi of ESPN. Tom, thank you so very much for sharing your time to join us for the podcast here.
Thank you for having me, Larry. My pleasure.
Okay, I'm guessing that when this podcast runs, you will have already, the story that you came to Clemson to report will have already run on ESPN. So maybe if you could just share some background on the story that you've done on Dabo and his time at Clemson, and I guess the 10-year anniversary of his taking over as head coach at Clemson.
Well, really, Larry, to be honest, it's not even going to begin to approach the tremendous work that you've done, which is to tell that story as fully as it deserves to be told. Our story will be much shorter due to the time constraints of College Game Day, where we're just picking a handful of moments between that day in October when Dabo Swinney was named the interim coach to the day, less than 2 months later when he was given the job full time. We obviously know what's happened in the aftermath of that decision, but it just looks at a couple of moments along those 7 weeks in that timeline.
You really go to school on these stories and these coaches or whoever the subject is for your wonderful features that you do on a regular basis. How far back do you and Dabo go?
Well, first of all, in the notion of going to school, one of the reasons we're able to do that is because of teachers like you. When you're able to provide that kind of content and that kind of insight, it naturally leads to such a strong foundation to work off of in terms of what to ask, where to guide the interview, what we can try to do to shape the story, again, in our time constraints, 4 or 5 or 6 minutes long, however it would be. I go back not nearly as long as some other people do with Dabo. I think I probably first met Dabo back in 2012 or so. So that would have been 6 years ago when Clemson was well underway in terms of becoming one of the standard bearers of the sport. So I don't have the depth and length of connection with Dabo that many other people do. But in the last, since we've met, I've certainly spent some time with him each of these seasons because of ESPN's deep connection to the sport.
Is he unlike, I know most great coaches are unique in their own way,
right.
But is he maybe unlike most any other coach you've ever encountered?
His program reflects his personality more than any coach I've seen in the sport, bar none, more than any other coach. The only other team I can think of that reflects the personality of the head coach as much is the Golden State Warriors. I think because I cover the NBA at times, Larry, nowhere near as much as I cover college football or golf or tennis. But he has built a program by his design, in his image, with his values. And he's been remarkably consistent in doing that. And I think I don't know what your experience was, Larry. I feel like a lot of people wonder whether they ever say it out loud. Is this guy really this way? Is he too good to be true? Is this an act or is it authentic? And certainly 6+ years, 7+ years into knowing Dabo, my assessment is it's completely and totally authentic. And there's reason behind all that he does. And a big part of that reason ultimately comes from his past experiences and what he saw in that notebook, Larry, that he's kept for such a long time, that he filled with ideas should he get the opportunity. And he has continued to fill that notebook out and build an incredible program in his image.
Have you seen the notebook, the binder?
No, I haven't. I'm eager to do so, but catching him in bowl season and everything else here as we're trying to do the story, Larry, you had better timing than we did.
And you're referring to the series of articles we did back in October to correspond with his the official 10-year anniversary, October 13th. Very flattered, obviously, that somebody like you would read that and use that in your pursuit of the story. What did you learn in your pursuit of the story as you came to Clemson? What was the most profound thing, I guess, that you took away from it that you discovered?
Wow. Well, where do we begin, Larry? First of all, again, the series is so revealing and so insightful if you're a storyteller. And storytelling is built around anecdote, right? Because there's always going to be people who can break down strategy and scheme. There's always going to be people who can give you the XO. But to me, people remember and relate more to a story. And one of the most telling moments that Dabo shared with you and with us was his first action after he got out of the Terry Don Phillips' office, the AD who gave him the interim job, was that he walked into a storage closet in the facility, called his wife, Kathleen, and then tried to gather himself as best he could and regain his composure. And of course, what did he bring in there with him? That binder. And he began to flood it with more and more ideas, coaching staff, players, fans, training, everything. Because Terry Don Phillips had told him, you're empowered. Act like you're the head coach. Do whatever it takes to fix this. You're empowered. He spent half an hour in a storage closet, and in the next half hour, he walked down the end of the hall, and he fired the offensive coordinator. That tells you something about his confidence and his conviction an hour into receiving the interim tag.
You know what was really fascinating to me was his word choice that he used on that call to his wife, Kathleen. He said, honey, we're fired. And she starts crying. And then he said, and it gets worse. I'm the interim coach. He didn't say, but I'm the interim coach. Did that strike you as...
Well, I think, Larry, there were two calls there. He called Kathleen a series of times that day, but you're referring to the very first call in which he had said he had an overwhelming sick feeling when he was named the interim, because essentially, Larry, he didn't use this was my term, not his or yours, sort of a dead man walking. That when you go back and you look all the way back to the 1980 going forward to Dabo, the likelihood based on empirical evidence that an interim who serves more than one game gets the head job, it never happened. Dabo flipped that around. He understood that. And it was after the Terry Don Phillips meeting where he then called Kathleen back and said, we might have a chance. We might have a chance. So that one meeting, how important was that meeting? Well, 7 weeks before the decision in terms of what Clemson football has become.
The binder, also really fascinating because it's not as though he just put that together, when he had the interim job. I can't remember, maybe a year and a half before he was up for the UAB job.
Right.
And he really wanted that job. And he was telling me, I already had slogans, Blazer Nation, and you could see all of these ideas taking shape of this coach who was going to become, this major figure. But if and when you get a chance to sort through that binder, what's really amazing is the vision that he had, things that wouldn't take place for 4, 5, 6 years, 8 years, 10 years beyond, the facilities, the people he was going to hire as assistant coaches. Brandon Streeter's name was in there, I believe. Tony Elliott's name was in there. And also the various support staff members. Just amazing the vision that he had even way back when he was just a receivers coach.
And the vision, Larry, that he has executed. I don't know that there would ever be a way to, it would take a tremendous amount of work to find out whether there is any coach who has hired more former players on staff, people he has coached or have been a GA for him, than Dabo. 19, Larry, are on his staff right now. He told me that today. Think about that. That's astounding when you think about the people that he brings into his life and keeps in his life. The quality of that connection, the depth of it. I think that says a lot about writing that name, Brandon Streeter, in there years and years ago. Tony Elliott, the incredible story, Larry, of how he told Tony that he was going to hire him, where he did. Sycamore, the Sycamore Street part of that. Dabo living on Sycamore at the time, and Tony having been involved in a traumatic accident where he lost one of his parents on Sycamore in a different part of the country, and him wanting to change the association of that word in Tony Elliott's life, and so telling him about the hiring on Sycamore Drive. That is an amazing, amazing anecdote that I think that's a window into Dabo.
Can you take our listeners inside your process? We're sitting here 2 days before the Cotton Bowl. I'm assuming your story is going to run the day of, correct?
Yeah, it'll run in College Game Day.
Okay. You are obviously immersed in the finer points of this story right now. How long do you go until, you feel like, okay, I have enough? I mean, you were just there today during media day, chatting up Brent Venables, and you said Dabo Swinney told you something today. How long does this process last, the reporting process, before the finished product begins to take shape?
Well, Larry, all of that reporting hopefully can help serve SportsCenter as a venue, our other shows and shoulder programming. Hopefully it can serve game day and some of the reports that we do, a pregame show that we do. Hopefully it can serve sideline, whether it's myself or Holly Rowe, who's sharing the sideline duties with me for the Cotton Bowl. It's all of that reporting, again, hopefully, which is anecdotal in nature, that takes people into a place that they may not be able to go and lets them learn something that they didn't know. The television piece, again, no other way to say it, Larry. Again, while I'm pleased that we've had the opportunity to do it. It's I think a little less than 5 minutes long. And one of the big differences in television is so much that's so wonderful in Dabo's origin story is apocryphal and anecdotal. It's not necessarily visual. So that's a challenge in TV in trying to render that. Dabo is such great TV. He's such a great interview that you keep him on camera a lot. But the piece is now edited and done. Like I said, it's a shade under 5 minutes long, I believe, and that'll be on College game day.
When I sit down to write a story I'm fascinated about, there's no limit. I can write an 80,000 word story if I want to. I can write a 6-part series if I want to. 5 minutes. How excruciating is it sometimes when you have poured your heart into something and you want to do it justice, and you're, I guess, fighting for time for that subject or that story?
That's the hardest part of the process by far, because you know this, Larry. You want most to be accurate and fair. And then after that, if that's priority 1A is to honor the trust a subject has given. That's what you want. And that's why the battle for time can really be so tough. Because, listen, I'll never believe there's nothing that exists in the realm of objectivity. Because as soon as you select something and omit something else, that's a subjective act. There is no objectivity that's pure and total. But what there is sin of omission. And a lot of times, I think that's the sin that TV can bring, and that I frankly commit over and over, the sin of omission, where we're not able to share the story as fully as we'd like to.
You mentioned earning trust. When you are parachuting in to a college town, and you are trying to get someone to open up to you and share things that are very personal, how do you earn that trust? Not necessarily with Dabo, but in other people whose stories you're telling.
2 years ago, we came to do the story about Christian Wilkins and the tragic death of his grandfather, who, for folks who don't know, was shot and killed in a mistaken drug raid in Massachusetts. Very difficult story to tell. And we did not have a lot of time to tell it with Christian, who's a magnetic, brilliant personality and mind and soul. And really, in that case, Larry, you have to hope that the connection follows, in a way, the interview. But the interview itself ultimately comes down to the quality of the question. Are you prepared? And hopefully, are you asking the right questions, listening to the answers, and following up in the right way? That's the ultimate bedrock of a story of that nature. I mean, I'm still in touch I mean, I see Christian all the time, but I'm still in touch with his mother, who is such a remarkable figure. His whole family story, Larry, as I'm sure you know, is an incredible portrait of success when you consider secondary, collegiate, master's degrees all over the family. He has many siblings who are successful. Obviously, winning the Campbell Trophy is an incredible feat. But Christian Wilkins and why he wears number 42, I think that story will forever stand apart for me. That shows his soul and what's important to him.
You've also grown close with Nick Saban, which is a lot harder than growing close with Dabo Swinney or Christian Wilkins. What has that been like, the relationship with him, and maybe some things that you know in knowing him that the outside world might not know?
So Nick Saban has been kind and cordial to me almost from the jump. I think the first sit-down interview we did was very rocky. I'll leave it at that. But after that, he's continued to show kindness and a warmth toward me. But I'll tell you, there are many things about Nick Saban that I don't know that. I think people look at the side. They look at his mask of anguish on the sideline. They look at times what can feel like the blast furnace of his anger toward a play not being executed properly, and that's all they see. And that is a mere fraction of who he is as a man. What's made him the greatest college football coach in history, one of the greatest coaches in any sport in American history. And I think one of the things people miss, Larry, there's 1,000 things, but one is his humility. One of the things that Saban has done year after year is change. You have to, he came into this season having lost 6 coaches. He had to replace 6 coaches on his staff. He's always willing to listen to a new voice, to entertain a new idea, to change from power to pace, from pace to pro style, and not just in strategy, but in human connection. I think he's far closer to his players, Larry, than people have any awareness of, and does a lot more for them than he lets most people know.
Yeah, the thirst and desire to adapt and to seek new ideas. Dabo is also really, that's one of his, I guess, trademarks. Are obviously the presentation, the outside, the comparison with Dabo and Saban is like they're opposites, but are they more similar than a lot of people who are following on a surface level understand?
No, there's no question that they are. There's no question that they are. And I think part of that, again, is their shared authenticity. As different as they are as souls, they're very similar when it comes to being the genuine article. They are who you largely believe they are. And I mean the people who know them, and not necessarily the public perception and how that could simplify things. And they get along well, the two of them do. I think there's a great respect between the two of them. I know that Nick Saban has tremendous respect for what Dabo Swinney has built. And we all know what Swinney has said and how he feels about Saban and the program being the standard and the rest of y'all bus and all of that. So I think there's a lot that's shared between them, that there really is. And I'll tell you one of the things, considering that Saban is, a decade and a half older than Dabo, he hasn't shown any sign, Larry, of his passion waning. Certainly not that I see. One of the first places you see it, and you know this, is in recruiting. And boy, Nick Saban still gets out there and actually enjoys recruiting.
Business owners out there, if you own a business that accepts credit cards, you need to listen up. Tandem Payment, based right here in the upstate, run by Clemson folks, is changing the face of payment processing, quickly becoming the most cost-effective solution for all small businesses. Tandem's program saves you up to 90% on processing charges and gives your customers what they love most, choices. This is not some crazy introductory offer. Tandem's technology allows business owners to offset their credit card processing costs by applying a small customer service charge to each sale they make. If you want to know more, visit tandempayment.com today. Former Tiger Hot Rod McDowell works over there at Tandem Payment. They handle all their business and customer service face-to-face. So give them a call, 864-672-1570. If you're tired of spending an arm and a leg on all those credit card processing fees. Is the difference between the two, the biggest difference, maybe the environment? You've been in both of their football facilities. The Clemson football facility is obviously about fun with the slide and the games and all that stuff. And then the Alabama football office, I think I heard you say this on James Andrew Miller's podcast maybe within the last year or so. You said it's all about tension and stress inside those walls in Tuscaloosa. Am I getting that right?
Yes, it's a pressurized environment. There's no doubt. You walk in there and everything is pressurized. And typically, the thought in any management book you'd ever read was that people do not operate best under tension. They don't. Then I would ask anyone who's written that line or subscribes to that philosophy, which seems to make a lot of sense, to understand what a contradiction to that Alabama is with its success. A lot is demanded. You can say the tension comes from the unexpected. If that's the case, it's not a tense place. You know what to expect when you walk in that building, and you're expected to deliver. And if you don't, you'll be held accountable until you do. That is every single person, task, role in that building. They celebrate, they have fun, but no one has as much fun that I've seen in the way that he does as Dabo Swinney. Now, Nick brings the new guys out to the lake house. He rides with them as we showed in the training days series that we did. He's dragging them behind on the inner tube and having a ton of fun. And that's a part of him that people don't get to see as often. They see it all the time with Dabo.
That side of Saban has been shown more recently than before, as you mentioned. Do you think that is maybe in part a reaction to, okay, you got Clemson over here having all this fun. We need to show that Alabama needs to show that they're having fun too?
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. I Saban is keenly aware of the greater landscape. And again, I think that's humility, Larry, that awareness, not we do it the way we do it and everyone else and everything else be damned. That is not his way. He appreciates, understands, studies context, and adapts to it. So I think that's a smart point you just made.
Here we are. Clemson is in the playoff for the fourth straight year. Alabama, of course, has been in it every year, and maybe the most entrenched dynasty in college football history. And yet it feels like...
Stop. I want you to stop right there for a second, Larry. If they were to win the title, Bama, forget about... They're the most dominant... Take UConn women's basketball out. That's unique. That's its own universe. Take them out of it. They're the most dominant dynasty of this century in American sport. Alabama football. Bigger than the Red Sox. Bigger than the Spurs, bigger than the Warriors, bigger than the Patriots, more successful than any of them. That's Alabama football if they were to win this year.
Wow. And I guess what I was getting at was it really feels like both of these programs are kind of just getting started.
Well, the only thing I'll say about that, Larry, is you've been around long enough to know success, this is the Saban quote now, right, is not a continuum. Harmony is fragile. You know why? Because life is. The Golden State Warriors. Let's just let's just punch their ticket to the finals. Everything. There's turbulence. There's disharmony. There's injury. There's self-interest. There's all these things which are enemies to unity and sustained excellence. That's what's so astounding about Dabo and Saban, that they have found a way to defeat that. That's incredible. One of the things that Saban said and Dabo echoed, there's a lot of books that tell you how to be successful. There are hardly any that tell you how to stay that way.
No doubt. And Tom, 10 schools have made the playoff over its 5-year existence. So 10 schools have filled 20 spots. Of those 10, 7 over that 5-year period have had at least one 5-loss season. 4 of those schools have had a losing season.
Wow. I did not know that. That's a great nugget.
That just shows you, what you're talking about. Maintaining that edge and that drive in the presence of, or in the wake of, great success is the hardest thing to do. What is your take on people? There's this clamor for expanding the playoff because people say it's boring now that the same teams are playing for the championship and winning it. What's your take on that?
Well, let's get to how you define boredom. Boredom comes from indifference. And indifference, largely to me, comes from ignorance. Ignorance not meaning lack of knowledge, meaning it's being ignored. We don't care about it. I certainly don't think that's an issue for the CFP right now. And I realize that we're deeply entrenched in it. We love the sport. But I don't think we're overstating its spot in the landscape, in the American sporting landscape. I think college football is, if you're going to make the case that the 3 biggest sports in the country in no particular order are the NFL, the NBA, and college football, that's pretty good. And I like the current format. I really do.
You know what I'm not sure a lot of people appreciate is the presence of 2 dynastic programs. I think Clemson qualifies. And, what do connoisseurs of any sport do? What if the 95 Nebraska team could play the 2001 Miami, coexistent, 2 dynasties coexisting is so rare. And I'm not sure, nobody really talks about that regarding Alabama and Clemson. Do you see what the point there is? Is that a legitimate argument in your mind?
I think it's great for the sport. I do. I understand that everything in the NFL is designed to create parity, but parity at times feels a lot like, dresses a lot like, looks a lot like mediocrity. It does. And to have 2 teams that go against each other time after time, I know people say, well, we want to see somebody new. Well, that's easy. Then beat them. Show that you're better and beat them. And again, there's so much about the clash between the 2 in terms of culture, style, and the games they've produced by and large, Larry. 2 of them have been 2 of the great championship games in any sport this century.
Yeah, no doubt. Have you been able to get any reflections from Dabo about, I guess, memorable recollections from you about what it's like to be facing his alma mater every year, and for that to be the bully on the block, the team he out of the womb was pulling for?
I don't think I don't think right now, considering what he's built, and again, it being in his image, I don't think that resonates as much with him as it does perhaps with us as a storyline. I don't. I think he's driven to sustain this excellence, and he obviously sees Alabama as having done so. That's a model, but truth serum or or him in a very relaxed state, he's going to tell you, we're not far off. And he's right.
The best is yet to come is what he says so often.
Yep.
Tom, thank you again so much for your time. Thank you for the kind words about the articles we did a few months ago, and just really, really appreciate you sharing your insight with us and your thoughts on Dabo and a lot of other stuff.
I just think, Larry, again, at the risk of being redundant or sounding obsequious, I really think that whether you're a Clemson fan or not, the series is so fascinating as a portrait of success, of the capriciousness, if you will, of what leads to somebody being placed in that position. The other decisions that surround what has turned out to be one of the great decisions, which is to have Dabo Swinney be the head coach of the Clemson Tigers. It is fabulous. And again, whether you love Clemson football or you don't, it's a great case study of how a success happened.
I want to share with you one anecdote from when Dabo allowed us to, and thank you again, by the way, when Dabo allowed us to trail him as he walked around the old McFadden building, the old football offices, to sort of retrace his steps that day. We walk into Dan Radakovich's office, which was Tommy Bowden's office and then was Dabo's office after he took over. And they're sharing a few laughs, Dabo and Dan. And then as we're walking out, Dan says, "Wait, I want to show you something." And he pulls open his desk, his top desk drawer, and he moves some papers around. And at the bottom of that drawer is the name Dabo that is scrawled into that desk that he that he wrote back when he was the interim coach. And he said, "I left my mark," is what Dabo said.
Yep, exactly. And carved his name in the drawer just so that in case it didn't work out, he'd know that he'd left his mark. Exactly.
Fantastic. Okay, Tom, once again, thank you so much, and I really look forward to watching this story on game day.
Thanks, Larry.
Take care. All right. Thank you, too, Tom Rinaldi, for being so gracious with his time. Man, I tell you, one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. Certainly one of the nicest celebrity types, I guess, who maybe have reason to get full of themselves. Tom is the exact opposite of that. So really appreciate him being so generous and thoughtful and complimentary of the work that we do at TigerIllustrated.com. If you want to read the article that we took from this interview from Tom, and you're not a subscriber at TigerIllustrated.com, it's a free article. And so go check it out and check out some of the other stuff. Don't think you'll be disappointed. Would love to have you come aboard over there at TI. Thank you to our title sponsor, Parham Smith and Arch & Holt Law Firm in downtown Greenville. Also, Tandem Payment in Greenville. Really appreciate the support of our sponsors. Could not do it without them. Also couldn't do it without you folks for making this a part of your listening routine every week. We've dialed it back some during the Christmas and New Year's and playoff season to one a week. We'll probably keep it that way until next week at the earliest, I guess. So stay tuned next week. We might have a surprise in there between now and then. You never know who I might run into out in Santa Clara. Maybe get an interview done out there, but we'll see. Okay, everybody, have a great week. Happy New Year, and be safe. Cheers.